I'd like to continue our series on the environment, on climate, on the teaching of Pope Francis with regard to the environment in that wonderful letter of his, Laudato Si. Praise be to you, O God, for the gift you have given us, the gift of the environment. I'd like to consider some insights that have been offered by the United Nations on climate change. It's fascinating, really, that the United Nations has taken such a tremendous interest in this work with regard to climate change. And I think the idea is that it is a representative body of all of the countries of the world, and climate change is something which impacts certainly not our own country here in the United States of America, but really the whole world. And so it's important that we work together on this issue. So many issues really are important to have strength and insight and sharing with regard to solutions that are transnational. And so this certainly is one of them. The United Nations, in a recent report, has said climate change is about to get worse. So really not good news. It will make the world sicker. It will make the world hungrier. It will make the world poorer. It will make the world gloomier, and it will make the world more dangerous. So this becomes then, of course, a very serious matter because of all of the negative consequences climate change can have. Uh, this report is from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it is a panel that tries to work with many governments and tries to really look at, well, what is the best research on this? What are the best facts that we can get out there? What is science telling us? What are some of the indications that this is a serious problem? Some of the current issues that the report mentions are increase in deadly heat, that it is getting hotter throughout the world, and of course that has tremendous consequences. One of the other issues is increase in fires that are caused by climate change, which of course, again, impacts people very deeply. Homes being burned, large areas of forest being burned, which again increase and exacerbate the problem of climate change. Floods and the devastation that those floods can cause. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, droughts. So it's remarkable impacts when you think of it. You know, one area of the world you've got floods, another area is suffering droughts. It's amazing the effect that this one aspect really can have on our life on this planet as human beings. Uh, the report details 127 negative effects. So you can see how serious and substantial this is. It's not just 1, 2, 10 even that maybe you could deal with, but the 127. And some of those are what the report calls potentially irreversible effects. Uh, and this is where it gets troubling because, you know, a lot of the effects, well, if we take this particular specific action, it can minimize the effect of it. But some of these effects, they cannot be reversed. So what do you do in that situation? And so we have a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity that is presented to us. And that is the good news, that there is this window. If we take certain specific concrete actions, we can really halt some of these 127 negative effects, which of course will be to the benefit of all peoples. Um, by the year 2100, so 78 years hence, there will be 4 times more climate extremes than now, even with a change of a few more tenths of a degree of warming over today's heat. So what happens if, even if there's a slight amount of warming, it will increase these storms, these negative effects. And so obviously the key here is what can we do as human beings to reduce that warming, and that certainly will help. Um, if temperatures increase nearly 2 more degrees Celsius, 3.4 degrees Fahrenheit, will lead to 5 times the floods, the storms, the drought, and the heat waves. So just imagine that 5 times more. That could certainly be overwhelming. Think of the damage that will be done if we don't take those steps. 5 times more damage. It's another, the damages that we have now are enough, and we find it impossible to deal with a lot of these uh, damages that have been caused, a lot of these floods and the drought condition, which leads to people having to leave their homes and try to find a place where they can raise crops. Difficult, and of course the whole impact there in terms of hunger in the world. Presently, according to the report, there are 3.3 billion people are highly vulnerable to climate change. 3.3 billion. So you can see the extent of this. This is a tremendous problem, 3.3 billion people. They are 15 times more likely to die from extreme weather. So these people that are highly vulnerable are much more likely to die because if there is a weather event, if there is a flood, if there is a terrible storm, if there's a tornado, hurricanes, all of these storms, people will die from them because they are certainly more vulnerable. The areas where they live, it's precarious, and so it can be very difficult for them. Now, the very troubling aspect of this report, and something that Pope Francis has taken pains to point out to us, and something that's very important for all of us to reflect on, is the question of, well, who will be hit the hardest? And Pope Francis points out in Laudate Si that it is the poor in these situations who are hit the hardest. They have the least resources. They're the least able to move to another location. And they have the least ability to rebuild if there is a devastating weather event in their area. So this is really something that's incumbent upon us all to change and address. And many times it's very intriguing that scientists will point out that the ones who cause the global warming are what we call the more advanced economies, because they are using more of the fossil fuels. They're causing more of the pollution. But yet the poor and those who are most vulnerable are not really causing as much uh, global warming. They're not really the ones who are precipitating the crisis, but yet they are the ones who are suffering the most severe effects from it. So there's a real imbalance there. So these are just some initial considerations, and in our next presentation, we'll go into some additional uh, uh, findings from this report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that has been provided to us by the United Nations. But I think it's important to reflect on reports like this, and many people, of course, will dismiss them and say this is just fear-mongering, there's no basis. But these reports are well researched, and certainly as a person of prudence, it's important to look at them and to try to take those steps to avoid some of these negative effects. So I think our best posture in terms of this is to take some time to reflect on these items that the UN has presented to us and to try our best to move in another direction, as Pope Francis has been encouraging us through an ecological conversion. So in the future, we'll take a look at more of these. God bless, and we'll talk later.